a problem they need some help with. Not that you're going to come and be doctor, but you're going to listen to what they need and see if you could if there's some way you could help them achieve that.
Well,
you're about their people, their dreams. What do they need?
Yeah, so you don't look at you're stopping looking at yourself, and you're looking at what does the other person need in their life? What's the
Absolutely, and I'm not saying that there are some things that you would need that other people would need too. I'm not saying that that's not a good idea. But I'm saying that you're finding out where are people coming from. How do you know what they need? You've got to find out who they are and how their life would be better. That doesn't mean you're going to necessarily do it, but you're going to listen, because then you're going to be of the people. You're going to be trying to make their life richer.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. So
but only they can tell you how their life would be richer.
Well, when your father was driving past and his eyes connected with that little girl who had marks on her face, she didn't tell him how her life could get better, but he
knew.
Yeah. So he proactive. What did he do? He called the hospital.
No, he didn't. He got on to someone down Macquarie Street. A Macquarie Street doctor.
Okay.
Who could he get who could come to Cobar, or he could refer the girl to?
Yeah.
So he became proactive. How could he put her in touch with someone who would be able to do something for her?
Yep.
He didn't think he had the answers, but he would put her in touch with someone who did have the answers, someone who's prepared to do something.
Yeah. So he connected her with who could help exactly.
Mm-hmm. That's right, and who was prepared to.
So tell me a little bit more. So he was Mayor of Cobar, where you guys were born and raised. Was he born and raised in Cobar?
No, he was in Bulli.
Bulli. He
grew up in Bulli. He was in surf clubs and things like that. But when he got to Cobar, he started to become active in he was mayor for a lot of years. He was in council.
For 10 years.
He got into areas where he could do something.
Yeah. Okay. What was he working in before that?
Post office. He worked in the post office forever.
Oh wow.
So he was still in the post office.
Yeah.
People would come into the post office if they wanted to talk to him as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that was his job, but he listened to people. He was mayor of the town as well. He was on the council,
mm-hmm.
and he sort of like Cobar needed. It was a very dry town, and so he decided they needed a lot more trees, and so he started getting all these trees. He sent down to Sydney to get trees, and he went round the town putting them in because he wanted the town needs a lot more trees, and he used to go round on his bike with his water bag on the bike every day, watering those bloody trees. And so for years he looked after the trees and made sure. And now when you go to Cobar, there's a lovely lot of beautiful big trees. He knew the town needed trees, and he did something about it. That's what I mean.
So he was really, would you say he's proactive, and was he like a problem solver? Like that's how his mind was always problem solving.
Absolutely. You'd see a little girl who had all these scars on her face, and how he thought how hard it would be her going through life. So he got onto Macquarie Street specialist, and he made some inquiries as to what would need to be done for that girl.
Yeah.
And set about doing it.
Well, I mean, I think one of the most remarkable stories you've told me about your father. So he was the mayor for 10 years.
Oh, about 10 years, perhaps even more. He worked in the post office. He was a postal clerk.
But his postman, okay, and his that story of where they were beating up that man who had murdered someone, and the man called him.
The man was in jail because he'd murdered somebody.
Yeah. And
the police were building him up. And you're allowed to have one phone call or something, and he called the house because I took the phone call.
Wow.
He wanted to talk to my father because the police were building him up. And so when my father knew about that, he went down to the police station to stop them from building him up.
Wow.
Even though he was a murderer, my father didn't give the police the right to build him up.
So your father was pro-life, wherever it was concerned.
Yeah, I remember taking a phone call. I can still can still hear that phone call because he
Wow.
wasn't home, but I took the phone call.
Wow, that's amazing.
From the man in the police station.
Jeez. So your father was very likable in the town then, I guess, or a
Yeah.
lot of people knew him.
Well, he worked in the post office. Everybody knew him.
Of course.
And he was in Parliament. He was in council as well. He was the mayor for 10 years. He used to get us more votes than everyone else added together. Because people knew he was genuine. He cared about them.
Yes.
He cared about them and about their lives and how he could make their lives better. I mean, we were in Cobar and kids didn't have an education.
Yeah.
And so what my father said about there was people he knew who didn't have any kids who had a bit of money, and he said about building a hospital so that kids who couldn't get any education could come into town and build and board. I mean, that's what I mean. He looked for the things that the town needed. They needed more trees. They needed whatever they needed. He would think about what could he do to do something about achieving that.
Wow. And did he ever try? So you tried to go into Parliament, you were saying earlier? He
was going to go into Parliament. He decided he was going to go into Parliament. And so Cobar and Broken Hill were in the same sort of electorate. And so he decided he'd go over to Broken Hill and he'd talk to the unions over there, and that's what he planned to do. But the man who was in charge had the newspaper was a friend of Dad's, and he wouldn't let him talk. He stopped him because Dad was such a good speaker and such a lovely man that he didn't want Dad to talk because he'd get too many votes.
Wow.
So that was the man was a good friend of Dad's, but he knew that Dad was genuine. That man wasn't real. He was an all right man, but he wasn't like Dad.
And he owned the newspaper.
He owned the newspaper, that's right.
It's always whoever owns the newspaper, eh?
Well, you've got the access, haven't you? He didn't get elected either. But I mean, he didn't let Dad have access to the people so he could talk to them.
The platform.
Because he said Dad was such a good speaker, he didn't want him to talk.
Wow. So I guess they weren't friends anymore.
Oh no, Dad was still friends with him.
That's the good I guess the good Aussie way, isn't it? You just get on with it. You don't let things kind of
He didn't
weigh
lose
down.
anything. The man was still there. The man was sort of fairly self-centered, and he ended up coming. Although he was in Broken Hill, I can remember being in Sydney, and he moved down to Sydney, and I remember meeting him for lunch one day.
Oh wow.
So he still remained Dad's friend.
Wow.
Dad wasn't someone, if you can do something for me, you can be my friend. I am your friend.
Yes.
You can do something for me and choose to, that's okay, but I'm not courting you to do things for me.
Yeah. He didn't hold grudges.
My father thought that the town there weren't trees. They didn't have trees. And so he got a whole lot of trees from Sydney, and he went round on his bike every morning with a water bag on his bike, and planted trees all over town. He was proactive. He did things himself.
Wow.
He didn't tell everyone else what they could do. He didn't tell people they could do what he wasn't prepared to do.
Incredible. So he never had any influence to go into politics prior to that or to make change? He didn't have family or friends or anyone that...
No, he didn't. He didn't. But he was the mayor of the town,
Yep.
so he would have been in politics, wouldn't he? He would, you know, I mean, after all, the people are voting for you, so... And he worked in the post office, so if anyone had a problem and they wanted to talk to him, they'd go into the post office and talk to him.
Ah, so it started there. He was solving problems from the post office.
Yeah, he was available to them.
Well, I would love to see him in the post office for sure.
Yeah, he was lovely.
Yeah.
He was genuine. He didn't use people to get what he wanted.
Mm.
He was genuine.
Wow. And
if he saw there was a need in the town, he tried to do something about it. I can remember there was a little girl came to Cobar. It was during the war, and she'd been sent out to Cobar so she wouldn't be killed, so she'd be safer. And my father heard she was coming and said to me, "You make sure you look after that girl. You introduce yourself and you look after her."
wow.
So my job was if there was someone in trouble or whatever, my father expected me to do something about it as well.
Yes. Yeah. He had high expectations that you would
care. He did have, and I mean, I can remember one day they saying, I think I'm going down to the Dagos to get a milk shot. My father was horrified that I called them the Dagos. And so he put me on the bar of his bike and went straight down so I could meet the Dagos and see what lovely men they were. And so he went down there, the cafe, and introduced me to these men. And from then on, I got double ice cream in my milkshake.
There you go. I love that story. Do you think this had a big influence into your career choice of becoming a counsellor?
Well, I learnt to care about people. I learnt to care about that I had a lot of advantages and they didn't. I learnt that other people mattered, Carl. I learnt those things, so I put those into my life.
Yeah.
Not doing what I could get from somebody else, but somebody else had a need and could I help them?
Yes, fantastic. And you did
and my mother was the same. My mother was secretary or president of just about every organisation in town. She cooked for everybody. She was an incredible lady.
Wow.
And so I had parents on both sides who cared about people.
Incredible. So do you think back then a lot of people were more engaged with community, more engaged with trying to help each other out, like it was more of an occurrence than in our day today?
Oh, I think there were people then who cared about people and were prepared to do something, and there were people then who were just out for what they could get, Carl.
So same people, just different times. Yeah.
I think people are people, Carl. They're either good people and they care about other people, or they're out for what they can get.
I think you summarised people in one sentence.
Yeah, and I think of Dad who decided that, as I said, that the town needed more trees because it didn't have any trees up in Cobar. And so Dad then ordered all these plants, and then he went round and dug holes around the town and put them in and went round with his water bag on his bike every day to water them. And then he saw a need and he did something about the need and he continued on to make sure it worked.
So he followed through. What's that story about the lady that couldn't swim? So he
someone was drowned.
Someone drowned, right, in the town.
Someone drowned, and so my father got lifesavers. He used to belong to Bondi Lifesavers.
Bondi Lifesavers. He belonged to Bondi Lifesavers.
He's a very good swimmer. And so he got these lifesavers to come to Cobar for a week or something, and they had all these classes down in there. Because the water was dirty, like you couldn't see it. It was brown water, because it was tank water.
Yes.
And he got those people to come to the town, and he got them to teach men in the town, to teach the kids to swim. So he was proactive. He saw a need. He saw how could he solve it. He didn't necessarily do it himself, although he did do the lessons with the kids. He did do that, but nevertheless, he would get other men from the town who were going, and women, who would, teach the kids to swim so they wouldn't drown.
Yeah. Wow.
So he was proactive.
Resourceful as well. Yeah. Incredible man, Dinah.
He was an incredible man.
Definitely.
You certainly you knew that you had privilege, and so you looked after people. I mean, he was mayor of the town, and I can remember he said to me once, people will do a lot of things for me because he was mayor. You do things because you do things, not because you're using influence to do it.
Yeah, well, that's I guess that's an interesting segue into politics and politics of today, where there's so much corporate influence. Well,
you think when Dad thought he'd stand for Parliament and went over to Broken Hill, and the fellow from Broken Hill who owned the newspaper was a friend of Dad's, probably because of the Labor Party. They'd probably met at things, conferences or whatever. And he wouldn't let Dad talk because he knew Dad was such a good speaker. He didn't want Dad to have a chance to speak over in Broken Hill because he might persuade them to vote for him and not the other fella.
Yeah, so it's a. Would you say politics is a dirty game?
Oh, it can be. It wasn't dirty with my father, but it can be dirty because people want to win and they'll do anything to get in. Not everybody's like that, but there's enough people like it. They're in it to get something from it. My
Yes.
father was in what he could give, not what could he get. What could he give?
What could you give? Yeah, so
How could he make the town better? How could people's lives be better? How could he solve the problem of the little girl who had
yeah,
red scars all over, like blemishes all over her place? How could he make her life better so that she wasn't going to go through life with these dreadful red marks all over her face? How could he get someone to help her so her life would be better?
yeah,
And I would hope that her life, in one way of her being better, is that she became more caring for other people. I hope that that's what would have happened.
Well, yeah, I think that naturally happens. I think all that you and Clivey did for me for many years, and living with you for 10 years, and helping me through all my challenges and being there for me, and also you, Dinah, never giving up, even when I went into a dark place, never giving up on me, makes
When
me
you love
want to
people,
give
you
back.
don't give up on them, honey. You only work even harder. And Clive's father was a real Labor man, but he was on the this group in Oakley, and he used to he worked for other people all the time. And Nana his wife used to go around. She used to go around with Nurse Nugent, who she was a nurse, and she'd go around the town helping people who were sick, and Nana used to go with her. So that was who Clivey's parents were as well.
Yeah,
You're not what people are going to give you, but what can you do to make your life better in the place that you live.
yeah, you're grateful for everything that you have, and you want to make everyone else's lives better and give back.
Well, you feel that you feel, when I say you feel an obligation, well, in a way, I suppose I did feel an obligation because I had a father who, my father worked in the post office, and so if anyone had a problem at all, they'd just go down to the post office and have a chat to him over the counter, so that he was always available to people. And people used to ring him up, and he used to always be at meetings. I used to debate, and if I wanted to talk to Dad because he was so good at it, I would have to wait till 12 o'clock because he would be out to meetings till 12 o'clock nearly every night, and I'd have to wait for him to come home so that I could talk to him.
So
He was always there trying to make life better for someone, Kyle.
yeah,
Just the man he was. And it's not that his parents were like that, because they weren't. For his sister, they weren't into that sort of stuff. They were nice people, but they weren't into what could they do for everyone else. It's just who he was.
Did that level of obligation cause any strain on your family, like being out till 12 and being pulled every which way, or did you,
Well, not really, because my mother would have understood that that's what he wanted to do, that's what he did. And if you really need to be behind them, because otherwise they couldn't do it, because you'd be belly aching all the time.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you all had to be on the same page, the whole family.
Well, we were on the same page, Kyle.
Yes. And your brother and sister, your brothers and your sister, they,
Well, I was more active than my brother and sister. They were into sport. Jenny was into sport, and Peter was a good swimmer. Peter was into sport. Peter wasn't into what could he do for somebody else. I'm not meaning he was a selfish person, but he wasn't into what can he do. I was, Carl, because I really had probably been influenced by my father.
Well, were you the eldest?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I was his pride and joy. He loved me dearly, and I knew that. And since I knew that I had an obligation too.
Yep.
That I was his daughter, and I had to make him proud of me. I couldn't slack off.
Yeah. There's more expectation. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you guys talk about politics back in the day? With Clivey's family and your family, and was it like something you discussed a lot?
Not really. Clive's family. Clive's father was a real. He was for the Labor Party, and he would have He would have talked to you if you wanted to talk to him, and so would Nana. They were both the same, but I didn't really talk to them about politics.
No. It's such a it's become a taboo topic, or it's become an interesting topic, I think, in our day, and something people either don't want to get involved in, or people want to slam down your throats.
Because people get upset.
Yes.
You don't upset people, but if you really believe in something, you're going to say it. But I wasn't throwing the
2 cents in. Yeah.
Down people's throats, but by the same token, I did lead the debating team. I was the leader of the debating team, so I had, when I went to Ningan and Burke, wherever I went and I was in a debate, well, you're giving your opinion, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can't avoid it, can you?
Yeah, well, and I did that. I mean, I used to wait till my father came home before I went to, when I had a debate, it would be 12 o'clock before he got home from whatever meeting he was at, but I would talk to him about about the debate.
Wow.
Because he was such an incredible resource because he was so good at it.
You were very lucky, weren't you?
I was very lucky. And it was very rare. I think I only ever lost a debate once or twice. Carl, I always won. And I can remember the time I lost, I reckon I was robbed. I should have won.
Robbed, yeah.
But I knew your weight, and if you want to make a point, you let it go till about the third encounter, and that's when you come in. I knew when you came in. I knew the tricks.
Ah, yes. You knew the game. You were strategic.
I was. I only ever lost 1 or 2 debates in my life, Carl.
Well, you've got to be
good at it.
Yeah, and you've got to be strategic. Like your father would have been strategic with, his time as mayor. Definitely. How can he strategize to help out the town and, all that sort of stuff?
And see, he used to come home about 12 o'clock. There was always at meetings. So if I wanted to talk to him, I had to wait till 12 o'clock till he got home.
Yeah.
But he always had time for me.
That's impressive.
See, when I was learning to swim, you only had the Nui, which was a tank, like a dirty water.
Dirty water, yeah.
And it was a mine tank.
Yep.
And I used to wait for my father, to come home so I could talk to him about whatever it was that I needed his guidance on. And so he was always there, but I had to wait till about 12 o'clock because he didn't get home till then. So he was always late because there was always at a meeting, and my mother was secretary or president of every organisation in town, the P&C and the Red Cross and the CWA. She was always the president or the secretary.
Did you have the Rotary back then?
No, well he I don't know what they did, but he wasn't in Rotary.
No.
He was in more the working man's, more there, rather than Rotary's a bit more elitist.
But you and Clivey were in the Rotary eventually.
Pardon?
You and Clivey went into the Rotary eventually.
Oh, Clivey did.
Yeah.
Was in Rotary, yep.
Yeah. For how many years?
Oh, a long time, Carl. I can't remember how many years he just was.
Can't count.
But Clivey was always in Rotary because he was building somebody's garage, or some poor old lady couldn't do something, and so the Rotary Club were painting a house. Clivey was always in Rotary because he was doing something for somebody all the time.
Wow.
Not because he got great advantage from it.
Of course.
Mind you, he got the comrade, the fellowship with other men, and that was good. Other men who do things for other people.
Yeah.
And so they were Clivey's friends.